Who was guilty of cheating, and does it matter? These events took place several years ago, even before the Waldorf Astoria began its renovation. The elegant lobby stretched from Park Avenue to Lexington Avenue. In the middle stood a large clock, ornate, gilded, with the Statue of Liberty on top. When you're there, I'm sure they'll still be there to see. A landmark, the perfect place to start your wedding anniversary celebration. Robert Jones, a seasoned print news editor for a well-known newspaper, hurried down the street through swirling snow swirls to meet his wife of 25 years, Anne. A successful marketing executive, Anne, of course, was already there, always on time. They were a strong couple, established, respected, independent, and devoted to each other. Robert was a gracefully aging, successful man whose charm and sharp wit made him invaluable in the main newsroom. Anne had been the driving force behind many of the most successful campaigns in cosmetics marketing, herself charming and known for not tolerating fools, regardless of their race, creed, or gender. Robert reached into his pocket. Who knows how many times he'd done that while rushing here. Christmas coincided with his 25th wedding anniversary. A long, thin box, a diamond necklace he'd made for her, 25 stones, his love for her traced in the gems. He had been secretly saving money for several years to be able to give this gift. Robert loved beautiful words, so on the box there was an ornate inscription, "Our love in diamonds." Why such an extravagant gift? Of course, 25 years is a milestone in itself, and Christmas has always been special to them. They met at a party on Christmas Eve and had a date night party every year in honor of this beautiful holiday. The snow made the night seem special, and he could feel his attraction growing as he rushed to his favorite woman. The Salvation Army Brass Quartet was standing outside Grand Central Station, and he crossed the street to make a donation. It slowed him down, but he couldn't help himself. It was Christmas. Even encouraged by the spirit of Christmas, he felt that there were dark times in their life together. They seemed to be drifting apart. Anne's career growth in her company burdened her with increased responsibilities and a new need to travel. Robert was leading a group of young reporters full of energy, with little experience, and the perfect opportunity to get his favorite newspaper sued if there was no steady hand. They began to see each other less often, and Robert feared that he and Anne were beginning to get used to it. Anne suggested that they not pay so much attention to the holidays and find something they wanted to do. Perhaps together, perhaps not. He hoped to capture Anne's attention and tear her away from whatever was consuming her. To join him in renewing their marriage. Not that he was worried. He firmly knew Anne would never deceive him. Their relationship had always been solid, and he trusted her. It never occurred to Robert to ask if Anne was happy with the way things were between them. Some things should be taken for granted. Wasn't that what trust meant? Robert carried flowers in his hands. He hummed a Christmas carol. He walked with a springy step. He couldn't wait to enclose Anne in his arms and carry her off into the fairy tale night he had planned for them. At that moment, several men came out of the bar. Anne was right behind them. She stood by the clock and looked around. Of course she was happy. Anne was never late, and Robert always seemed to be late. "Anne, hello, my love." One of the men separated from the group to walk over to her, hugged her tightly, and kissed Anne tenderly right on the lips. At a loss, she habitually responded deeply to his kiss. "Mike, honey, what are you doing here?" Realizing that her husband could show up at any minute, clearly agitated, Anne pulled away. But it was too late. Robert had already seen what had happened. He stopped and stepped back to see what would follow. Anne was still looking around. She was clearly nervous. "I'm in town for a quick meeting and then leaving JFK Airport for London on the first flight in the morning. Are you free for love tonight? Your husband?" Without realizing it himself, Robert moved slowly towards them, listening with increasing concern. Who was this man? Who was he to Anne? He could see the wrapped gift in her hands. Was it for him? or for this stranger, and their obviously loving kiss in such a public place. "Robert Jones," he introduced himself. Anne's face froze, her gaze darting from her lover to her husband and back again. "I see you know my wife, Anne, and your name is—" "Bill Johnson," came the stammering reply. Bill looked helplessly at Anne. What was he supposed to say? "I see I caught you both at a bad time. You two have some catching up to do. There are plenty of rooms available at the hotel if you haven't booked yet, and I have to go. Anne, perhaps we can meet later. I'll call a cab." Robert rummaged through his pocket, trying to pull out his cell phone. Instead, he found himself pulling out a gift box. Anne was fidgeting with her gift in her hands, not knowing what to do. "Anne, don't worry. I'll find my way." Robert looked down at the shiny, long, flat box with the shiny black ribbon. Tears stood in his eyes. "And anyway, it's for you." He turned away as he shoved the necklace into her hands. Behind him, a scolding could be heard. They were exchanging angry words. He stopped paying attention to it. Robert needed to leave, to get away. How had it come to this? What had he missed by being too busy working? How could his Anne betray him like that? "Stupid, cheating bitch!" "Robert! Robert!" Anne called out to him, but he was already at the top of the stairs. Her voice came closer and closer, but he was already on his way out. There was a cab there, and he quickly got into it. Robert gave the address and disappeared. Anne saw the cab merge into the stream of cars. One cab in a sea of cars it was hopeless to find. What had she done? Robert could never know. She had been so careful. How could she have been? Who knew she would run into Bill? How could he have been so blunt and flippant, approaching her so openly? Had Bill really ruined everything? How could Anne fix it, if at all? Bill broke away from his companions and finally caught up with her. "Anne, are you all right?" "Do you think he guessed?" "Anne, you saw that he figured it out. Of course he figured it out." "Anne, I'm so sorry." Anne nodded and told Bill it wasn't his fault, but her whole look blamed him. What gave him the right to treat her like that, in public, where anyone could see? Couldn't he just say hello and move on? This was a disaster. Robert had been destroyed. She would have to rearrange her schedule to make time for her husband. She would talk to Robert and explain why they had to overcome this unpleasantness. Soon, Anne had an idea of what she would say to bring Robert to his senses. It was a good plan, and Anne saw no reason why it wouldn't work. Robert stared out the cab window at the lights whizzing by. What had he missed? When had she managed to get so far away? Was he angry? He had a feeling he was. But if so, why wasn't he screaming and beating the asshole with his fists? Instead, he was alone, running away from the woman he loved, lost in mutual accusations, silent, trying not to cry. Whatever he felt, it was far more than anger. For the first time in his memory, Robert Jones didn't know what to do. He felt blinded, abandoned, and betrayed. When Anne got home, Robert wasn't there, which was no surprise. Anne changed her clothes, dragged a chair from the living room into the hallway, and settled in, waiting for her husband to come home. She woke with the rising sun to find that he hadn't come, and she was alone. It was Saturday. He must have rented a room. He would be home this afternoon. She suppressed the urge to call his cell phone. He needs time to think things over, she told herself. When he calms down, as he always does, we'll talk and work things out. By noon, Anne was starting to get nervous. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she was in a complete panic. Anne called his cell phone, his office, his gym, 2 bars she knew he liked, half a dozen of his friends, and his mother, who she never got along with. No one had heard from him. By Sunday, she had called the NYPD, the FBI, the state police, and everyone she could think of. A private investigator had been hired. Of course she did all that. Her husband was missing and she needed to find him. For some desperate reason, she thought it would help if she went into town and looked for Robert herself. The crowds of people out shopping made her search a waste of time. When she called her sister Beth for help, her family got their first glimpse of how dire the circumstances really were. By Sunday lunchtime, Anne's two sisters and their husbands, their children, her parents, her mother's sister Beverly, his mother, some of Robert's oldest friends, and her immediate co-workers from work were gathered in the dining room listening to the detective. People get lost all the time. The holidays are always a bad time for emotional trauma, and Christmas especially. There was no reason to believe that there had been an accident, or that Robert had been injured. He had suffered a severe emotional upheaval. This remark drew a few sharp looks in Anne's direction. From everything the detective had heard, Robert was a reasonable guy. They should give him a chance to surface and see what he had to say. Anne went into a rage, screaming. No, that wasn't all they could do. No, they weren't going to wait and see if her Robert's corpse floated in the river. He must put aside his other business, do his job, and find her husband. Don't they understand? Anne wanted to shout to them. She needed her husband. She needed to talk to him, to explain. If anything happened to Robert, how would he ever understand what she had done? How would he be able to forgive her? How could she forgive herself? The detective said all the right things and slipped out the door. In truth, he couldn't have done more. This was Anne's mess, and it was her job to clean it up. His departure marked the beginning of the Great Rage controversy. Attendees said they knew the right people who could do something, then hid behind their cell phones as if they had suddenly found something important. Anne's brother led the chorus, chiding the police for not doing more. Both mothers sympathized with the misfortune that had befallen their families. In truth, they were powerless and knew it, and feared what might happen. Her sisters despised her. Anne could feel it. Beth announced that Christmas dinner was canceled, and until Robert was found, she would prefer that the family give each other some space. As the voices grew louder, Anne fell silent. Her anger was exhausted and fear squeezed her throat. When Beth made her statement, Anne realized she had no voice in the room. What could she say to the people who cared more about her husband than she did herself? Anne learned what it meant to be truly alone. Eventually, everyone left. She went up to her bedroom to change. Her dress from Friday night was still lying on the bed. She picked it up and saw the gift box. What was the last thing Robert had said? No, not last. What had he said as he left? Anyway, this is for you. Anne read the inscription and opened the box. She took the glittering necklace with a trembling hand. She fainted and fell, still holding the necklace in her hand. It was 3 days until Christmas, and her husband was still gone. Police in the city have dormitories where they can eat and sleep while working long shifts. Newspaper men know where these places are, and they have friends who will let them sleep over for a few nights when they can't or don't want to go home. Robert had used this many times in the past. It was a 30-minute walk to the office, and Robert was still in his clothes he had been in 3 nights before. A quick stop at a men's clothing store fixed that. Another quick stop, and he bought a razor and shaving cream. No matter how bad things got, he still had to work. The paper would go to print. Deadlines are deadlines. He used his voicemail to listen to calls, had a conference call with his co-workers at 9:15, met with the right people before noon, and spent the afternoon working on an article discussing sea level rise. The paper acted as all great bureaucracies do. If you don't know exactly how to contact the person you need, there is no easy way to contact them at all. If Anne tried to contact him, she failed. Oh well, what was there to say? For her part, Anne was useless. Her father was ready to tell her to go home, but that would only make the situation worse. Her men were combing through hotels, motels, anywhere anyone might be staying, from Boston to Washington, D.C. She'd turned her entire department staff into her personal detective agency. If senior management didn't like it, she didn't care. At one point, Anne could be heard yelling that they should start looking under bridges, which signaled a growing frenzy. Holly, a senior graphic artist, was the one who solved the mystery. Her father served on the NYPD. "Police have vacation spots," she said. 20 minutes later, Anne had a list of addresses and phone numbers. 2 minutes later, each dormitory was called. When the address where Robert was located was confirmed, Anne was on her way. Robert was already feeling better. The sergeant on duty had made it clear to him that he could stay as long as he wanted to go. The job seemed to be going well. At least it was working. On a beautiful, cold, clear morning, he went out for a walk. Anne stood in the path, no more than 50 feet ahead. "Robert, I've been looking all over for you." "And you found me." Robert suddenly felt detached, as if he were watching him speak from the sidelines. Shouldn't he be more emotional, he thought. Something was going on inside him. He wasn't sure what it was. He could see Anne in this amazing focus. But as much as he was aware of Anne's presence, Robert felt dead inside. It occurred to him that he should be more upset, but he wasn't. Had he lost all feeling? "Please, Robert, let me explain. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to find out the way you did." "Sure, Anne, but really, what's there to say? That you have affairs with other men. I know that now. That you kept it from me, I know that too. That you were only caught by accident. So I was there. I don't want to hear about the sordid details or the stupid stories that it was just sex and it means nothing to us. What can you really say?" Anne felt Robert slipping away and headed toward him, hoping to physically shorten their emotional distance. "Do we have to talk about this in public? Can't we go somewhere and just talk about it?" "Anne, I found out about it in the hotel lobby. What could be more public than this? If you have something to say, I suggest you say it now." That stopped her halfway through. Anne realized she wasn't going to lull Robert into a pretense of normalcy and then wear him down. "All right, Robert, let's talk. I love you so much. I've always loved you, but I was starting to feel anxious. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know how to tell you because I didn't realize it. When I got promoted and spent so much time traveling, I was with a lot of different men who paid attention to me. Sometimes they would flirt with me, and I realized that I liked it. It was the fact that they were new that made their attention different. I was no longer restless. I was excited to be appreciated as a woman. I needed that, and I couldn't ask you to give it to me. Would you have given that permission? We've been together for so long. It wouldn't be fair." "Anne, you could have told me all this any time. That my beautiful wife gets compliments. Do you think I'm such a fool as to be surprised or jealous? There was something else, wasn't there? You didn't have sex with me? No need for details, just a yes or no." Anne looked down and hesitated. To her credit, she looked her husband in the eye and said yes. And there we have it. I don't know why or how we got here. I can't tell you where I failed you so badly that I lost you, but obviously I did. Robert heard him say goodbye. Had he done it because Anne had confirmed his worst fears? Or was it his unconscious decision when he left Anne with her lover at the hotel? He couldn't tell. All he knew was that the words had escaped his lips. It was as if someone had taken control of his mind and body, and he was an outside observer. Robert realized that he was walking past his wife and going his own way. Anne stood in shock, trying to comprehend what her husband had just said and done. It was just sex. It didn't matter. She only loved him. She had explained it all. Why couldn't he see that? Why didn't he believe her? The city blocks in Midtown Manhattan are short on streets running north and south, but long on streets running east and west. A native New Yorker, on her way back to her office, Anne got lost. She kept looking for landmarks, something to orient herself, but was too distracted. She kept coming back to what Robert had said. He didn't mean all of it, did he? Her feet hurt, she was cold, and her phone kept ringing, so she turned it off. There was a coffee shop, and she found an empty seat. Why was Robert so angry, so sad? He hadn't really said anything. He didn't want details. How many people? Were they the best lovers? Were they rich? Were they bigger than him, better in bed? Isn't that what men want to know? Words to throw in her face. All the possible reasons for that, Robert just didn't want to know. The mere fact that Anne hid what she was doing was enough to break him. Had Anne really underestimated him? Was Robert really that weak? Why didn't he fight back? He should have claimed her and fought for her. That's what men do. It struck her later like a sharp pain. No, you fool. You broke your husband's heart because you didn't believe he would listen to you. You never gave him a chance to talk to you about what you wanted. You never told him you were changing. You never gave him a chance to find ways that you both could use to make things work. Why should Robert trust her now when she didn't trust him before? No, Anne. The truth is that you were afraid Robert would say no, and even if he did, you would still cheat on him. You didn't love him enough to tell him and live with the consequences. You made him second to your lover, and you lied about it. You betrayed him for sex, and now you can't live with what you did. The lies we tell ourselves are destructive. The truth, if told too late and for the wrong reasons, can be even worse. Her conversation with Robert had been a mistake and another disaster. Anne picked up the phone, but then slowly put it down. Robert was right. She had nothing to say to him or anyone else. She had ruined everything. Christmas had come and gone. Beth softened, and the family got together on Christmas Eve to feast and exchange gifts. Anne was invited, but knew better than to attend. No one wanted her there. A few weeks later, Anne was on a long conference call when her father called and told her she needed to take an emergency call. Robert was in a mental institution for observation. He had tried to kill himself. He hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. The police were called because Robert was found sitting with a loaded gun and a suicide note. Will she show up? His office listed her as an emergency contact. Anne was on her way, even as her staff provided Robert's room number and doctor's office. By the time she arrived, Anne had regained control of herself and demanded to see her husband and his doctors immediately. 2 physicians, both board-certified in psychiatry, one of whom was the author of a respected textbook, attended the meeting. The other was the principal investigator leading a national study of depression and suicide in middle-aged men. One of them said, "Your husband is very ill. He is clinically depressed, has developed a suicide plan, and has taken steps to obtain a weapon. He is a clear danger to himself, if not to others. We are taking him off heavy medication in hopes of giving him a chance to pull himself together. Whatever brought him to this state was a shock, but he won't tell us what it was. We were hoping you might be able to help us with this." Anne made up a story that probably didn't make sense. The doctors took their careful notes and talked among themselves as if that would do anything. It wasn't helping Robert. She needed to talk to him. "I want to see my husband. When can I see my husband?" "We can certainly allow you to see your husband, but it has to be behind a 2-way mirror. Right now, we can't risk anything that could make Robert worse. Sadly, that may include seeing you. Was it a bruise on one side of his face? He hadn't shaved in weeks, and his hair. Had they even been cut since she had last seen him? Had he ever bathed? The hospital gown exposed his bony legs. He looked old, abandoned, homeless, and uncared for. His hands were cuffed. His head was thrashing from side to side and back again. He was muttering something with only his lips, a word she couldn't hear. What was he doing with his fingers? She stepped closer to the glass. The attending didn't stop her. His fingers. Was he pointing at something? The ceiling? The walls? Had Robert seen her? He seemed to sense her presence and yelled louder. Was he shouting her name? It seemed to Anne that he was shouting her name. Was Robert pretending to fire the gun with his hand and fingers? Was he aiming it at his head? Was he still trying to kill himself? Anne walked away without saying a word. She realized for the first time what she had done and realized what she had to do. Visiting hours ended at 8 p.m. At 7:30, a family van pulled up with what looked like a mother and daughter who had come to visit their dad and husband. The security check was perfunctory. While the security guard was distracted, the mom handed her purse to her daughter through the metal detector. No one noticed this. Just before closing time, the daughter left, and the mom went upstairs. Psychiatric wards are primarily designed to keep patients inside, not to keep people outside. Anne hung her coat on the coat rack and remained in her starched white lab coat. Grabbing a clipboard and specimen tray, Anne slipped onto the floor, and surprisingly, she had no trouble finding the key on the sleeping nurse's station to get into Robert's room. How long she sat like that in front of him, Anne didn't know. Hours seemed to pass. Gradually, as the medication wore off, Robert came to his senses. She must have dozed off, and when she looked up again, Robert was awake and staring at her intently. "Why are you here? You asked me to come, and I am your wife." Robert looked away. "Robert, you told me what you wanted. You told me what to do." Out of the corner of his eye, he watched her pull a small gun from her pocket. "I know you want to die. Because of what I did, you want to die. So do I. We had a good life together once. Let's end it the same way. I'll go first, then you, and maybe we'll see each other on the other side." Robert looked at his wife. He saw her as the girl he had married and everything good that had ever happened to them. She had her plan, but he had his plan too. For Anne, it was as if Robert was looking at her for the first time, and she had never felt more insecure. "Give me the gun. Check the hallway." Anne held the gun out to him. The hallway was empty. She thought her mind would be working feverishly, but it wasn't. What would it be like to kill herself? Would she be able to do it? Could she put a gun to her head and pull the trigger? It sounded like a plan, but it really wasn't. She was running away from her own life. Part of Anne hoped that after death, really they would be together. If not, at least she would share her husband's fate. There was a dignity in their joint choice of how to end it all that Anne could accept. "They come through every half hour. Keep your eyes open. After the next round, we act." Anne watched. It was her duty. She owed it to her husband to join in. Her throat caught, but she could do it. Anne had to see this through. It was the only way to undo all the pain and suffering she had caused. She closed her eyes and said a little prayer to whoever might hear it, that she and Robert would be together forever. "Anne, it's time. Let's do this. Sit on the bed. You first." She hadn't been this close to Robert since that night, and it made her nervous. But it made sense. The gun would fall where Robert could get it. She picked up the gun. Anne thought it would be colder. She shouldn't hesitate, Anne thought. Putting the muzzle to her temple, she said with one lip, "I'm sorry," to her husband, and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. She pulled the trigger again and again, nothing, and again. What was wrong? Everything was going wrong. She was going to free Robert and be with him, but the gun wouldn't work. She looked up. Her hands were busy with her latest failure as a wife, her eyes full of tears. What a terrible risk. So many ways it could have gone wrong. Robert shuddered. Even as he left that night, Robert knew that Anne would muster all her strength to find him. She would put her entire staff on it, call everyone, hire professionals, and bribe the newspaper staff to report him. She would tell herself she was just trying to find her husband, when in reality she was trying to control him, to find him first, and then to please him with love and guilt. Gently, she would make him back off the ledge and let things go back to where they were. Perhaps Robert could reconcile with his wife, but he would never succumb to Anne's parade of new lovers. Life or death was what it came down to. Would his marriage to Anne live on or die? Robert couldn't tell. Robert realized Anne was ready when she showed him the gun. It was easy enough to take it from her and empty it, but none of this drama mattered if Anne didn't play the scene out to the end. Robert didn't think she would. She might put a gun to her head, but she would never pull the trigger. To his amazement, Anne pulled the trigger. How could she do that? In awe, Robert looked at his wife and saw her in a whole new way. He smiled, and Anne looked at him in confusion. Robert opened his left hand to show the cartridges. His right hand reached for her, and Anne took his hand and pulled him to her. She didn't let him go for a very long time. Time to go home, wife. And they lived happily ever after. Yes, it took some time, some very good lawyers, and a lot of effort to convince the medical professionals before they were allowed to leave. Who was at fault? Does it really matter? Who deserved more to be burned? Who cares about that? Life is short. Love is short. When you find true love, dig in and hold on. Never give up. Pray for reinforcements and fight to the end. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you!